What's up, everybody? Gary Simon here. Today, I am featuring a discussion that I had with David Airey. And if you've ever gone down the rabbit hole of brand and identity design, then you've probably heard his name. So David is a practitioner of identity design and also an educator. And that's what this book is here. I purchased this book and read it, which is called Identity Design: The Process, because I'm getting back into freelance design, as many of you know, and one of the things I love tackling is brand visual identity design. So I reached out to David after reading the book because I really liked it, with just a few questions that I think a lot of you are going to find valuable. All right, let's get started.
Well, Gary, thanks very much for having me on your show. It's greatly appreciated. My name is David Airey. I am a graphic designer. I specialize in logos and visual identity design. I have been doing that for 20 years now, this year actually. And yeah, it's what I've always enjoyed doing. I'm not sure I could imagine myself doing too much else at this stage after so long, but yeah, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. All right. So just a real quick general background information before we get into the nitty gritty. When did you, well, you obviously started 20 years ago. My question now is has it been your sole focus? Have you branched off into other, adjacent areas like UI, UX design, handling web design for clients? Have you ever stepped into development, or has it always just been like solely brand design?
I did different things at the beginning. When I started in business, I would say yes to pretty much every potential client request that came in, just because I didn't have any other income, so I kind of felt like I had to. So I did
Right.
a bit of web design and a bit of coding back then, but
Right.
really
Okay.
what I always enjoyed the most was starting off with the logo and then fleshing that out into a few different design elements for my clients, because I liked how you could spend perhaps 4 weeks or 3 months, 6 months at most on one project, and then you're on to the next one. But
Right.
usually the clients that I design for, the projects tend to last between 4 weeks and 3 months. So,
Okay.
so yeah, I learn a lot from all different people in all walks of life, and doing all kind of
Right.
different jobs, and that's one of the.
So when you say, 4 weeks to 3 months, are you handling multiple clients in tandem, or is it usually like an exclusive thing?
I am, yes, I wouldn't take on any more than three or four at a time. No, I think
Okay.
I would stretch me too thin, because I would say really I'm working part time these days. Just the amount of hours that I do is maybe 20, 25 hours a week.
Hmm.
Uh, and
Nice.
and yeah, the rest of the time I would spend with my family and friends and just time to myself really. So I worked a lot more in the early days of business, but now, yeah, I like to have a bit of a slower pace.
Right, right. Yeah. And so, the next question, and this is something I struggled with, which is why I actually purchased the book. Just to give you some context, most of my audience knows this already. I haven't been in freelance design for a long time. I've been in the education route, for the last 10, 12 years. But before that, even though I teach UI, UX design specifically and have so for a long time on this channel, a lot of people don't know, like early on, I was into, I don't want to say full identity design, because I just designed logo concepts. That's all I did.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of found that, now that I want to get back into freelance, really just to boost and have content for my education business. Plus it's been so long, I kind of wanted to, just start establishing some portfolio pieces. And I found that when I did that, I was like, hey, I'm just going to focus on UI, UX design, because that's what I've really been focusing on teaching for a long time. But I found myself naturally gravitating back towards brand design, because the way I'm building my portfolio is just to kind of like get some just like personal projects, because I'm a developer as well. So I'm building my own apps and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And usually the beginning of the stage is the brand design. And I was like, wait, I haven't really taught this on my channel. I have uploaded one course on identity design, and ironically, it's my most viewed video on the channel, which is like has 3 million views. And so one of the big questions I had entering this, I was like, wait, it's been so long. I was like, how do people charge? How do people price? What is the model? What does the pricing model kind of look like for brand designers? Now, of course, there's not one answer for that. There's these brand design sprints, which I'd like to get your opinion on. And there's, you productizing every little thing, like how many concepts do you want? And so I was kind of confused, what avenue, what ways should I tackle this? So I purchased the book, Identity Design, the process, which is right here. And by the way, you guys all check this out. I'm going to be linking all of David's socials and websites, and you can check out all his different books. And so that was one of the things that I was really confused about. How should I price things and how should I go about that? So I was kind of curious to hear your take on that. Obviously, there's not a one size fits all, but what are your thoughts on kind of pricing and how modern design, brand design work is handled?
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. There's not one way to do it.
Right.
Some people price according to the client at one end. Some people price according to their hourly rate at the other. And mine is kind of in the middle. I would never recommend pricing hourly because that kind of it penalizes you for your experience. And what I tend to do is if I get a new inquiry, I'll say to my clients, previous clients generally value my work in the region of 10,000 to 25,000 pounds. And I'll ask them, does that fit with your budget? So some people might think, well, you're leaving some money on the table there because if a huge international company comes in, they're going to expect to pay more for that. But in my experience, I know what I need in terms of an income, and I know the experience that I can bring. And I don't want anybody to be thinking that I've got it in my head, oh, this is a huge client, I could be making a lot more money here. I want to give good value, and I like to think that I know what I'm doing, and I know how much people should expect to pay for that. Now, some people don't have the budget, and well, there was one instance many moons ago when I was approached by a company and I nearly didn't get the job because I was charging too little. And I was told that by the person after I was hired. They told me, you really need to be charging more than this. So that was a bit of a wake up call. But now, like I
Right.
said, I'm kind of in the middle of charging on an hourly rate
Right.
and then charging by the client. So it's a range that I put out front. And if that rules people out, then we're not the right fit. And if it reels people in, then great.
So, right. So what are some of the factors that would result in, you charging 10,000 pounds versus 25,000 pounds when you onboard a new client?
One of the main things is the amount of design ideas the client wants to see. So
Okay.
more often than not, I will prepare a presentation with one digitized idea, and that will be a presentation with maybe 30 or 40 pages. So there'll be different context in there and mock-ups. And often if a client has a more of a committee, if there's a board or if there are a few different founders involved, then they'll want that visual comparison of more than one idea, a left or right, or perhaps three different ideas where one's very safe, one's in the middle, and one's way out there.
Right.
Most
Right.
of my
Right.
clients, they'll opt for one, and that's because when we're talking before they hire me, I'll mention the fact that I'll discuss ideas with them before they see any design work. So I'll do research, and when it gets to the strategy phase, I'll describe three or four ideas in words to the client. Either I'll type them in an email or I'll mention it on a call or in person, and then their feedback will help me narrow the focus to the strongest one or two ideas. So it's
Right.
never more than three ideas that I present, and it's usually one.
Okay.
In addition to that, the design items that the client wants determines the price as well, because well, sometimes it's just a logo, but rarely, but more often it's you'll have the logo, you'll have stationery, you'll have website design that they can then pass on to a developer. There might be some brochure work or a bit of print design in there too.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And then additionally, if you're onboarding a new client that has a brand new business as opposed to one that needs kind of like a redesign or a refactor of sorts, how does that play into pricing typically? Like a
Not
rebrand versus something, completely new, like a new business.
Yeah. Well, a rebrand generally involves a bit more research because they've been trading for a while. So there's past documentation to go through and past design work that you can draw upon whenever you're preparing new designs. So
Right.
there's there's usually more work involved in a rebrand.
Right.
It doesn't affect my pricing too much.
Okay.
But yeah,
All right, cool.
that's a factor.
All right. So, yeah, we kind of covered different pricing models, but specifically, what are your thoughts on brand sprints? And have you done that sort of thing where like, hey, we're going to knock this out within 5 days or 7 days or anything like that? Because I know that's kind of a popular way these days for brand designers to kind of go.
hmm And I've seen some of the work that is produced as a result of brand sprints, and it can be excellent. If if someone wants to make money by working that quickly, then
Hmm.
good for them.
Right.
If that's a profitable way to design, then great.
Right.
My my take on it is that I prefer to spend longer and talking to the client, researching their past and where they want to go in future. Now, this this is probably involved in a brand sprint as well, but to a much lesser degree. And
Right.
I say to my clients, if it's a logo and a brand style guide that I'm creating, then I'll tell my clients it's generally going to be between 4 and 12 weeks, something like
Right.
that. A lot of
Okay.
that depends on how quickly the client is getting back to me and yeah, the research involved. But in terms of brand sprints, it's not something that I've done. But if somebody is making a successful business out of that, then
Right.
good for them.
Correct. Correct. Um, So are there, for people looking to get into this, are there specific networks, the social design sites, in the past? Well, I shouldn't say in the past, but their current sites, like Dribble and Behance, are there, outside of having your own portfolio site, which I think would be important, like your own .com or such, are there any networks that you kind of recommend in terms of getting clients and getting your name out there as a brand designer, and also maybe even social media networks, like LinkedIn, X, what have you?
I don't spend a great deal of time on social media. The two platforms that I would recommend more than others are probably LinkedIn and X. I
Okay.
started I started way back on MySpace, and
Okay.
then I
Yeah.
went into Facebook, and well, I had one page on Facebook with about half a million followers or likes or whatever, but they
Nice.
just throttled the reach so much. And then that
Yeah.
happened on Twitter too,
Okay.
and that's what I like about LinkedIn is that you can reach people more often. But what I generally dislike about social media is the fact that the platforms show you things that you haven't signed up to see. It's not just
Mhm.
a case of the people that you choose to follow. That's what you see. It's their agenda almost. It's just to get you addicted to spend
Right.
more time using it. And that's why I can see the benefit definitely because a lot of my clients do find me through the posts that I make on LinkedIn and on X. But
Okay.
what I do like more is more closed communities. I know that Katie of Creative Boom, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Creative Boom website, creativeboom.com. She's recently started a forum, which is kind of like a flashback to
Yeah.
the MySpace days where people sign up. It's just
Right.
a few thousand in there. And what you see is what people are posting rather than any any kind of,
Algorithm trying to
yeah,
suggest. Yep. Yep.
exactly.
I miss the days of vBulletin, PHP, BB, and such.
Uh,
Yeah, for sure. Another question I had is, do you kind of work solo or do you work with, other designers on some projects? How does that work out?
it's mostly solo. For
Okay.
20 years, it's just been me working from the various homes that I've been living in. And there'd be occasionally when I would partner with a development team of clients choosing usually. I do have quite a network of designers that I know that I send work their way whenever I'm either too busy or I don't have the expertise. But for the most part, clients hire me and I do the work. And I enjoy it that way because I get to know the clients and I get to know their businesses better and they don't have the potential worry of dealing with me and then me passing their work on to somebody else.
Right. So in terms of design software, what do you currently use, and has that changed much at all throughout the years?
It has changed in the way that PageMaker, PageMaker and freehand from quite a long time ago, or
Right.
it's where I might have started, but it's mostly Adobe's Creative Suite at the minute. I
Right.
am using Figma a little, but
So
it's
you're
it's
probably using Illustrator.
yeah, Illustrator is the program that I use to create logos because
Right.
I'm unfamiliar with one that's better at vector graphics, and it seems to be the industry standard. Well, it has been for almost as long as I've been working. So the main apps from Adobe is Illustrator, Photoshop, InDesign, and Acrobat. And that's where probably
Okay.
most of my working hours are spent.
Okay, cool. And then, so leading from that, have you personally integrated any type of AI video or image generation within your brand work? And specifically speaking, obviously, you're not going to be using this stuff to make concepts, even though I'm sure they're going to be able to do it very soon. But in terms of maybe brand presentation, like, you're trying to mock up some sort type of realistic, maybe there's a logo in a subway or something like that. Have you utilized any of the AI tools?
I have, yes. I quite like Midjourney for image generation. And it's funny because some clients, they specifically don't want me to use any AI image generation because they see it as not unauthentic. They would
Right.
much, in fact, one that I was working with just a few weeks ago specifically said, don't use AI, but if you can, find some stock photography. So they would prefer stock photography to AI. It actually turned out that some AI
Nice.
was integrated in that because they
Okay.
they saw a few of the results that I came up with
Oh
um,
yeah.
before that directive. But yeah, if I'm using AI, it's either trying to get wording right through ChatGPT for some potential copy. The visual side of a design project is often as important as the verbal side. So I like to pair imagery and logo design with copy. Now I'm by no means a professional copywriter, so I would always refer my clients to a few people that I know. But in order to give them some ideas, I would put a bit of copy in there. So ChatGPT and Midjourney would probably be the two that I would use more than anything.
Right, right. And I think, going back to what you said, some clients kind of don't want you to use it. But what's crazy is, the speed at which these models are being updated. It's
Mhm.
like the things that they're capable of is just like improving drastically. So it's almost a case of like, wait, have you seen what they can do lately?
Yeah.
So that's cool. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, that's, I guess the final question I would have is, anybody who's looking to get into brand design, here in 2025, I'm sure most of your advice is going to be timeless, because what it takes to be a good brand designer is what it's always taken to be a good brand designer. But what are sort of the things that you might recommend for a new designer? Like, what are the things that they really should be focusing on if they want to establish a career in brand design?
I would say to share your work, even if you think it's bad. We all start somewhere. I look at some of my earliest projects and some of them are pretty hideous. Uh, but if you share your work, whether on social media or, well, even when I started, I shared my work with friends and family, and that helped me get a
Mhm.
few projects. And continually share it, even if it's just some process, because process can often be more interesting than the end result. And try not to compare yourself to the best in the industry. I would compare yourself to your past projects, even if you're in the student stage. If you have a project that you did a year ago and then you're working on one now, you can see subtle incremental improvements along the way. And that is much more affirming than if you're continually looking to the best studios on the planet
Right.
and thinking, why am I not as good as these people? I've been doing this for 5 years, you know.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, compare
Awesome.
yourself to your past projects and enjoy it as much as you can because it's a profession that I feel that I'm privileged to be doing for a living when you consider what else we could be doing. You know, it's
Hmm.
not like I'm in a coal mine or, doing
Right.
some menial task where it's the same every
Yeah.
day. You know, it's
For
I
sure.
love what I do, and I think that's
Right.
important. If you don't love it, then find what you do love.
Right. Awesome. All right, everybody. We're going to conclude. Definitely check out, the only book that I've read so far from David is this one. I'm not a big book reader. It's not that thick, and there's a lot of great visual examples. So if you're somebody who doesn't really like to read, this is a very easy read, and it's also no BS in terms of the questions it answers. This is identity design, the process. So it's actually about the process that David uses in terms of dealing with brand design clients. In terms of pricing, it's just no fluff, very straight, direct to the point. So definitely check out David's website. I'm going to link all the socials and all the websites, and you can gain access to the books that he has written there. Thank you very much for coming on. I don't usually do these interviews because I did one before a long time ago with the guy from Blender Guru. I forget his name, and it was a disaster because I didn't know the right questions to ask. But so hopefully people gained some insight here, about David, who everybody knows in the brand design industry. So super excited to have you on. Thank you for coming. And if there's anything else you want to plug at the end, go ahead, David.
All I want to say, Gary, is thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure talking to you, meeting you, and to anybody listening, if you ever think I can be of any help, feel free to get in touch.
Awesome. All right. Thanks a lot.